I'm Professor Robert Thurman, and I'm the Tsong Kappa Professor of Buddhist Studies at Columbia University and the President of Tibet House US. I wrote the book because everybody likes the Dalai Lama. They think he's cute, they like his spiritual teachings, but they think his nonviolent political leadership is useless. And they think he sort of doesn't know what he's doing, and it's all so sad, and you got to really fight. That's because that's the ideology of our militaristic culture. And the premise of the book is no, his nonviolent leadership is global leadership. It's the leadership of leaders, and we have to follow that advice now. If we go on with the militarism, if we go into World War III, which we have waiting on every front, everyone will lose. And those people who are relying on conquest, like the Dick Cheneys of this world, have lost. I mean, they're shouting that they haven't and they did great and all this, but it's just a complete lie, and everybody really knows it in the masses of the people. And the Dalai Lama is the people who walks the talk of nonviolence. Here he's under genocidal threat and actual action by the Chinese People's Republic for many years, 50, 60 years, and yet, although he's very discouraged and he admits he's sick of them, especially the government, and the people he knows don't have the true information about Tibet, he insists on the nonviolent approach. And he insists on bringing China into the family of peaceful nations, not the imperialist imitation of imperialism that they are doing. In fact, they're tripling our imperialist behavior of the last centuries in like a few decades. And that is totally destructive to the world. So the premise of my book is we have to listen to him on the social, political level as well as the spiritual level. And therefore, he really does matter. That's the premise. And when people read the book, I've had the gratifying experience over the last year and a half that even Tibet supporters, I noticed was one of my motives, they'll go out and say, free Tibet, and then you ask them, do you think it will be free? They say, oh, no, it'll never be free. I can't, too big. China, no, they have no weapons. And so what's the use of their shouting free Tibet if they're hopeless? So when they finish reading mine, they realize that it's got to happen. It actually is realistic. What's unrealistic is to think that everybody's going to conquer everybody or somebody's going to conquer somebody. U.S. is finished. We can go and blow up some more countries, but that'll just make people more mad with us later when we really can't afford to do so anymore. And they won't let us just print any amount of money we want. And then China wants to go conquer everything. And Tibet is the place to make a stand against them non-violently, preempting the danger of World War III, which will otherwise definitely happen. So that's my premise. And people, I emphasize the positive. I emphasize the vision of the watershed of Asia, the water tower of Asia, nourishing 3.7 billion people with water from the glaciers of Tibet, which are melting not just by global warming, but by Chinese mismanagement and destruction of the environment 3 times faster than global warming would be having them melting. And that's going to dry up the river systems of 3.7 billion people in Southeast Asia, India, Pakistan, all the way to China itself. So that's my book. That's the main premise of my book. And then I show explicitly, based on Dalai Lama's own statements, his own arguments, his own proposals over 45 years, what he offers the Chinese and what a bonanza it would be for them to change their policy and befriend a person who is friendly to everyone in the world and who is the most popular. Actually, last November, he was voted most popular man on earth by a Harris poll, International Herald Tribune, worldwide, including Asia. Of course, not China. They're not allowed to vote. They're not allowed to mention his name because of the silly behavior of the government. But he is, the Chinese, if they joined in liking him and working with him, they would benefit, not lose. They would benefit enormously. And so I kind of prove that in the book, and people like it. Well, this one at this time specifically is very, very intensely mattering. And I think a future one will also matter. But unfortunately, if the Chinese miss this opportunity, and the world actually misses this opportunity by not supporting him enough to make the Chinese see that they really must switch their policy, then it will be a lot of worse mess. I mean, really bad. It'll make Iraq, when the Chinese attack Siberia, which is where it will start, when North China is completely dried up, and they want the rivers of North Asia. When they attack Siberia, and then the U.S., Russian, Japanese alliance, European-Japanese alliance goes against them, and there's cyber wars everywhere, and then probably nuclear, because they'll have an unstoppable, huge army. it's going to be just terrible. And that would happen, I think, if there's no switch in the next 4 or 5 years, maybe 8, 10, that will happen, in the 2020s, because there'll be no more water. People go on, you see these programs, by 2100 we'll be in tough shape. We are in tough shape now, and it's going to accelerate beyond people's imagining, the whole thing, And North China, the Yellow River in North China, the cradle of their civilization, is nearly dried up already. And their headwaters are Tibet. That is Tibet. It's a water tower. And it's where everything is stored, and it flows down there when it's not the monsoon cycle. And without it, Asia is finished, and tremendous distress arises, and upheavals and migrations. I mean, it's beyond conceiving, really is. He will die in Tibet, and Tibet will be in the path of being restored, its environment. It will have its internal true autonomy, the whole plateau. And the Tibetans, as they have for thousands of years, will be taking care of the environment in that plateau, slowing down the rate of warming. And then if China is then rekindling its Buddhism, which they would have to do if they recognized him and behaved nicely, they would have to let their own people, and that's 700 million Buddhists, would be going nuts. I mean, you can leave a few hundred for the Muslims and a few hundred for the Pope, 100 million, no problem. There's still 700 million Buddhists in China. And they will be calming down about this greed-driven, industrialized, wreck your rivers, poison the air, and make money, money, money. You can't eat it, you can't breathe it. It's not medicine, money isn't, it's just paper. And they'll stop that, or they'll lessen that, as we have to lessen it, as Europe has to lessen it, everybody does. And then we'll be on a good path, In other words, if this switchover occurs, which I think it will, I call it the Obama Dalai Lama revolution, peaceful revolution. And if this happens, everything will be fine. So I'm not into a panic like he's going to go any minute. Also, he's only 74, and he can last another couple of decades easily. But even that won't be necessary, because a human being, when under the gun, can do amazing things. Like I know people in Central Europe, in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, Václav Havel, Lech Walesa, these guys. Nobody believed they could be free of the Russian domination without violence, but they were. And they just said no, and they stood up, Velvet Revolution, and that will happen. It's going to happen everywhere. That's our new age, and it will happen definitely before Dalai Lama dies, and he will be like a leading hero of that event worldwide. Muslims, Christians, atheists, secularists, everyone will think of him as having helped turn the tide. He was the one who reacted to 9/11, writing George Bush a letter. Of course, Mr. President, that violence never helps a violent situation, and I'm sure you'll have a wise response, which unfortunately he didn't do because of manipulation by whatever, But poor fellow, But he showed us actually all how hopeless that approach is, trying to conquer everybody. He did show us that. Definitely it has, although I think that's quite a little bit the wrong way of putting it, because it is also the integration of Westerners into Eastern thought, into the Eastern way of life, actually. The Western way of life has been revealed to anybody with eyes to be self-destructive, actually, which means it isn't actually intrinsically the Western way of life. We have Plato, we have Socrates, who advocated a vegetarian diet and not eating meat and so on. Back in the Republic, he advocated that. And he said, if you eat too much meat, people will be sick and you'll have to have a lot of doctors. He did. 2,500 years ago, I was so amazed. And now, so in Asia, they didn't try to eat 30% protein and get cancer and all these diseases of our diet and our way of living and polluting our environment. Industrialization is not actually a genius invention. It is self-destructive. It's like cancer, actually, on the planet, planetary cancer. Because what cancer is random growth of cells, healthy, strong growth, without regard to the host where it's growing, so it then becomes self-destructive. And industrialization is big growth destroying the host, which is the planet. And economics is a demented science. It's not just dismal, it's demented, because the resources are free and the waste pollution, the waste disposal is free. And then it's just how much money you make in there is your domestic product and your whatever. And that's silly, because obviously the resources have a cost, tremendous cost, and the waste disposal has a huge cost too. And that has to be factored in. And if it was, there would be very different decision making in our industrialization. So we have to get into a more holistic, more enlightened vision. Asia was thousands of years ahead of us with nonviolence. Jesus was teaching us, but nobody, and many rabbis, other rabbis than Jesus, but nobody was listening particularly the Roman emperors were not listening. And so, but the Asian people, the rulers, did more listen to the Buddhas and the Lao Tzus and the Confuciuses. And so they were much more into nonviolence much longer, and therefore they prospered and thrived. And Columbus was trying to get to India because they were more prosperous 500 years ago. So we have to realize that we're not actually the center of the universe. The Mediterranean is not the center. It's peripheral, and we have to learn to live more in harmony with nature. Men have to live more in harmony with women, and stop driving around in their tanks. It's just useless. And that's we're making progress, but the rear guard action, Michael Dukakis in the tank, and Dick Cheney has tried his wheelchair, his bionic wheelchair, or whatever it is, and George Bush in his little fighter plane. We have to overcome that childishness, and have to live more organically and normally, and we have to control our government. Actually, we don't know when we have it. That's the great thing about it. Real happiness is that which comes up right out of your own cells, when you kind of let go striving for happiness. And in peak sexual experience, peak meditative experience, delicious food, friendly conversation, when you forget about yourself and how unhappy and miserable you are, which you usually are all the time, all cramped up in some drive to do something, get somewhere, then somehow your cells and your system and your mind and your brain, which is a very sensitive, ready to perceive aesthetic experience and have a great time, is reaching out and realizing that the universe is a place of blissful energy. And so that's when you're really happy. And you don't know it because you don't pay attention to that. You're engaged in what you're doing. You're lost in the zone of even, it could be just a conversation with a loved one, quality time, what we call, which we schedule like a brief 2 seconds between making money or running here and there. And that's what real happiness is, and you don't know it because you don't pay attention to it. The minute you try to know it and say, oh, how happy am I, how good, how much high quality is this time, you immediately evaluate it and it's not good enough. And I have to leave 5 minutes from now, so now that ruins the next 5 minutes because I'm going to be leaving after 5. So then we'll start weeping instead of enjoying being together, this type of thing, you see. So that's the cure. The key to happiness is loving people, enjoying your life, not worrying about a lot of things, letting your mind not live in some fantasy in your mind about some other thing that's going to be better, and appreciating what's in the moment. That is really what it is. And you won't know it when you have it, but you will. That's when you'll have it, It's a very lovely paradox. Life is very paradoxical, and that's what it is. We fall into cycles of negativity because of our ignorance of what's really going on, and that ignorance is not just personal. It isn't like we didn't learn enough in school. It's like the ignorance handed down in our cultures, telling us, well, you're worthless. For example, especially in the West, the religion was misinterpreted. Jesus' wonderful teaching about the kingdom of God is within you, and there's like a special providence in the fall of every sparrow, and relax, look at the flowers in the field, all this beautiful stuff, and which there are, by the way, thousands of rabbis in Jewish history teaching the same beautiful vision. And he was a rabbi after all, and people should, the Anglos should remember that. And he, we have been conditioned to, that's been distorted into, you're worthless and only God is great, and Jesus, you look what Jesus had to do for you, and you therefore get out and make some money or do something because you're so worthless. And then then the nihilists come along, the scientists supposedly liberating us from that, and of course the threat of eternal damnation in hell by this friendly God. And then they say you're nothing. They say you just die, you die, whatever. So basically you're 13 cents of cheap chemicals. I mean, so basically we're told we're worthless, and therefore naturally we want to justify our existence and rush off and be famous or make money or do something else, or even be a martyr and do something for someone in some sort of resent-breeding and not helpful way, actually. And so, so we have to wake up from that and develop our critical wisdom and intelligence. Spirituality is love and compassion, as far as I'm concerned, and meaning that. And particularly meaning that you are not just being rationally stuck within sort of what you think your body is wired to do. You're going into a deeper area of your mind where you kind of are asserting your free will, really. And you're choosing to be friendly and compassionate with people, whether or not they irritate you or whether or not they've done something to you. You're nevertheless choosing some sort of extraordinary, what we might say extraordinary. It shouldn't be extraordinary. It's actually not really, but we're conditioned to think it's an extraordinary response or outreach to people. And that is spirituality. Spirituality really is touching, and when you do that, and you sort of let go of your sort of self-protective and defensive controls, what you tap into is the nature of the universe, which is the flow of energy interconnecting things. And so then you naturally feel like interconnecting. And spirituality is where you let go, therefore, of your narrow, tight sort of control, identifying yourself just as your body, and I'm holding on to this, and I'm holding on to my chair, and this kind of thing. And that's really what it is. And whereas religion, and it is, of course, the heart of religion, too. But unfortunately, religion has this other component where it goes into, instead of what the sociologists might call pattern transcending activity, or mental activity as well as behavior, it's into pattern maintenance activity. And it becomes a tool of the state and the society and the conventional culture to control people and say you have to do this and you need that ritual and you obey this rule, and it stifles people's spirituality actually. And in the name of it, people will kill each other and they'll hate people who don't have the same belief instead of being loving and friendly. They will misinterpret, or they'll allow the priesthoods to misinterpret the teachings of the great founders who were truly spiritual and who said, don't behave like that, and they start behaving like that, the Roman Catholic Church. The Catholic part is great, universal, and the Church of Jesus is great, is really great, but the Roman part is the Roman Empire from Constantine, and it's a dominating thing, and it isn't nice. And it's conflicting even for the priesthood. And of course, many of the priests are saintly and wonderful. When they were more great mystics, they were better before the Protestants made them try to be more social, but to compete with them. But they too much adopted the stance of the Roman Empire is the problem. And religions do that. Buddhism too. It becomes a control mechanism rather than a liberating mechanism.